Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. New developments in the death of George Floyd, which has led to protests across the country. The 3 fired Minneapolis Police Department officers who stood by and did nothing at the scene of Floyd's death were taken into custody and will each face 2 unintentional felony charges. Meanwhile, charges against Derek Chauvin, the former officer who was seen kneeling on Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes, has had his charges upgraded to second-degree murder. Well, the mayor of Washington, D.C. is criticizing the military that has been brought into her city's streets as peaceful protests sparked by the police-involved death of George Floyd continue. Meanwhile, a top White House official is adding his voice to cries across the country for racial injustice. Natalie Brand is at the White House with more.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! A now familiar rallying cry as peaceful protesters once again took to the streets in Washington, D.C.
We're standing together, we're taking care of each other. We will be here until there's justice.
Militarized police and the National Guard have poured into Washington over the past few days, and active duty troops are also on standby. President Trump defended his law and order posture in an interview with Fox News Radio.
Maybe it doesn't sound good to say it, but you have to have a dominant force. We need law and order.
I think to insinuate or actually bring the United States military into an American city is unconscionable.
D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser criticized the president's use of troops in her city as she walked among the demonstrators.
CBS News has confirmed that President Trump and top aides were not happy with new comments by Defense Secretary Mark Esper. He said he would not support using the Insurrection Act to use active duty military to quell unrest.
The option to use active duty forces in a law enforcement role should only be used as a matter of last resort and only in the most urgent and dire of situations. We are not in one of those situations now.
The president has the sole authority, but at this time, he's relying on surging the streets with National Guard.
The defense secretary also took the unusual step of weighing in on the killing of George Floyd and racial injustice.
Racism is real in America, and we must all do our very best to recognize it, to confront it, and to eradicate it.
Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley introduced a resolution in the House to denounce police brutality, racial profiling, and excessive force.
And in this moment, Congress must function as the conscience for our nation.
It's a conversation once again elevated in the halls of Congress, as well as in homes, businesses, and streets across America. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
And former Defense Secretary James Mattis, in a statement tonight, denounced the president's actions and said militarizing our response sets up a false conflict between the military and a civilian society. He also said this is the first president in his lifetime who does not try to unite the American people and instead tries to divide. Now, protests also continued for a 6th straight day in Missoula this afternoon. The protesters, as they have all week, remain peaceful, and the city's mayor told MTN that the protests are not a threat to public safety. He did say, however, that contingency plans are in place should violence erupt. Well, the Senate passed a bipartisan Paycheck Protection Program reform bill this evening, clearing the way for President Trump's signature. That bill, which passed the House last week, gives small businesses more time and flexibility to use emergency loans by extending the 8-week time period to use the money in order to qualify for loan forgiveness to 24 weeks. The act also changes the so-called 75-25 rule, which required businesses to use 3/4 of the money for payroll costs. The new ratio is now 60-40. The legislation was passed by voice vote, 417-1. Montana Senator Steve Daines was a co-sponsor of that bill, while Senator John Tester also supported the bipartisan bill. Well, the spring warm-up is melting snow in the mountains, sending massive amounts of water flowing into the Yellowstone River and many other waterways, and that has left many homes and property along the Yellowstone near Shepherd under a layer of floodwater. Q2's Mitch Legge was in Shepherd today to get a sense of the flooding.
Every year, summer snowmelt swells rivers across Montana. Yellowstone County Disaster and Emergency Services knows of 2 homeowners on the Yellowstone trying to keep their houses dry, but many more are seeing flooding in low-lying areas of land.
A couple of homes throughout the county that access to the home might have been cut off or restricted. Otherwise, it's been just low-lying land and pretty significant erosion along the bank due to the high flows.
The Yellowstone River's minor flood stage starts at 13.5 feet of depth. The water has dropped about a foot since yesterday, but is expected to be hovering around flood stage through the weekend. Folks with property along the riverbank should take precautions.
Just make sure that your equipment is back away from the river. Make sure your animals are in a safe location so that they don't get cut off or swept down the river. Stay away from the banks. We never know when those are going to collapse and you become part of that flow.
With all of the lowland area flooding happening on the Yellowstone River right now, Yellowstone County Emergency Services personnel say that no one should be on the river this weekend, even if you have a hard-bottomed boat. Rescue would be extremely difficult for first responders if you did happen to get into some trouble.
So it's a very, very dangerous time to be on the river, even in a boat. I highly recommend nobody be on the river right now, at least through the weekend when the flows go down and the river gets a little more calm.
Reporting in Shepherd, Mitch Laggy, MTN News.
All right, thanks, Mitch. And Williams said that there's no federal or state assistance available to flooded homeowners right now because flooding isn't severe enough to meet the technical definition of a disaster. All right, turning to Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire. And Bob, water levels and flooding a concern all across the area. Really.
Yeah, let me show you. We got a graphic that shows exactly where we have some high and fast running water. You can see it here. Basically, it starts from Yellowstone Park and goes all the way up towards the Yellowstone River. Let me show you. Here's what we have working right now. Flood warning in the Yellowstone River at Livingston. Now, since last night, the temperature had dipped down into the 50s, and so we actually saw the water recede a little bit, down about a foot. But we are expecting warmer temperature the next few days, and that means the water is expected to rise, more snow melt right on through Saturday, probably get right back up to flood stage or maybe a little bit beyond. Same thing's happening in the Billings area on the Yellowstone. It dropped about a foot. It's also expected to get right around flood stage in the next few days or so. And a couple other places, the Clarks Fork of the Yellowstone at Edgar and Belfry also dipped back about 6 inches today, but now they're expected to get right at flood stage or maybe a little bit beyond by the time the weekend gets here. Once Monday gets here, we're expecting cooler temperatures. They're probably going to see all this stuff recede a little bit. We'll have your forecast in a few more minutes.
All right, thank you, Bob. Montana state health officials reported 2 new COVID-19 cases today, both right here in Yellowstone County. We also learned that there are 5 new cases in Bighorn County that haven't been reported yet by the state. 2 of the positive results in Bighorn County came as a result of those with symptoms, while 3 were asymptomatic and tested at one of the surveillance sites last week. Of those 5 cases, 4 are males, with 2 ranging between 50 and 59 years old and 2 over the age of 70. 2 cases in Yellowstone County, a woman in her 20s and a woman in her 60s. Yellowstone County now stands at 13 active cases and 102 total cases. The state total is now 525 with 464 recovered. Well, as the dust cleared last night and early this morning on Montana's primary election, the attention is already turning toward November. Tuesday set the general election stage for several high-profile races in the state and some other not-so-high-profile statewide contests. Here's MTN Chief Political Reporter Mike Dennison.
Topping the ticket this fall will be Montana's U.S. Senate contest between Republican Senator Steve Daines and Democratic Governor Steve Bullock. The 2 men had easy primary wins on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, Daines challenged Bullock to a series of 4 debates. Daines also has a new TV ad criticizing China for the coronavirus outbreak and calling for an immigration ban. And a Democratic group came out with its ad, blasting Daines for voting in March for a so-called slush fund to help big corporations recover from the pandemic. In the governor's race, it's Republican Congressman Greg Gianforte against Democrat Mike Cooney, the current lieutenant governor. You'll be hearing a lot from Gianforte about his business experience as he tries to turn the governor's office Republican for the first time in 16 years.
My proposition to Montana is very simple. I'm a business guy. I've spent my life solving problems and creating good paying jobs here in Montana. That's the message we started with, and that's the one we're going to finish with.
And Cooney says he'll emphasize a positive campaign, hitting familiar Democratic notes.
We're going to continue to talk about the importance of health care, having accessible health care in Montana, affordable health care, affordable prescription drugs. We're going to be talking about what the need to continue to invest in our public education.
In the battle for Montana's sole U.S. House seat, Democrat Kathleen Williams cruised to victory in her primary and says she'll offer a nonpartisan, pragmatic approach to problem solving.
I've traveled the state 75,000 miles on my car, talking to Montanans in every corner from Plentywood to Darby and Troy to Broadus and everywhere in between about what they care about and how I can be of service. And this is really about hard work, leadership, and service, not towing the party line.
Her Republican opponent will be State Auditor Matt Rosendale, who won a 6-way primary Tuesday. Like Gianforte, he's talking about business experience needed to help restart the economy.
We've had a lot of our businesses that have suffered, whether we're talking about Main Street or our farmers and ranchers. And my extensive business background just positions me perfectly to make sure that I can work with others to revive our economy.
We have plenty of other wide-open statewide races as well coming out of the primary. For Attorney General, Democrat Rafe Graybill, an attorney for Governor Bullock, will face off against Republican Austin Knudsen, a former Speaker of the Montana House. For Secretary of State, Republican Christy Jacobson, the current Deputy Secretary of State, emerged from a 6-person field and takes on Democratic State Senator Bryce Bennett of Missoula. In the race for State Auditor, Bozeman businessman Troy Downing won the GOP primary and will run against Democratic State Representative Shane Morageau, a Missoula attorney. And for State Superintendent of Schools, it's a rematch between Republican incumbent Elsie Arnson and Democrat Melissa Romano, who lost to Arnson in a close race in 2016. We also had a primary for State Supreme Court, setting up a fall showdown between Justice Lori McKinnon and challenger Mike Black, an attorney in Helena. So, get ready for some serious campaigning and the chance to make some real choices on the future leadership and direction of the state. At the Capitol, I'm Mike Dennison, MTN News.
And you can see complete election results and rundown of what's ahead on our website, ktvq.com. Well, voters will decide on a $1.6 million levy for School District 2. Superintendent Greg Upham announced the kickoff to that campaign today on Facebook Live. The $1.6 million levy would be for the elementary district and cover operational costs for kindergarten through 8th grade. That levy would add about $19.50 per year to property taxes on a $200,000 house. Mail ballots go out on June 17th, and the election date is set for July 7th.
Well, today kicks off the official date for the elementary levy. And I say that very respectfully. We're not living in a vacuum, completely understand the situation that's upon us, that the virus placed on us. And want to acknowledge that and respect that, very much so. There really isn't a specific earmark for these funds other than operational costs.
Upham says the elementary district had a $4.3 million deficit for this past school year. A retired priest had some items stolen this weekend, items that are worth next to nothing on the street but have a lot of sentimental value to him. Father Wayne Pittard retired from St. Pius Catholic Church in 2018. Someone recently stole his chalice and paten from out of his truck. He started using them for communion some 37 years ago at his first church in Great Falls. Pittard says that his own father made them for him by hand.
I would love to have them back. If I don't, I can live with that. Because they're things, and things are not what we're called to hold on to. It's the relationship and the memories and the love that my folks, and everybody who's been helping me. I mean, we got people checking pawn shops and eBays and Craigslist, and so, I mean, that by itself has been so special.
Father Pittard asked that if you find his chalice and paten to drop them off at St. Pius or any other church. Still to come on tonight's 10 o'clock news, Montana's sugar beet growers and processors lived through a nightmarish 2019 season, but things are starting to look up. We'll have details in our Montana Ag Report. And in sports, Scott shows us how college, track, and field teams have been getting by during this pandemic.
You're watching MTN News with Janelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Breen. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.